Throughout the American Civil Rights Movement, there were many court cases that shaped America. One of these cases was Plessy v. Ferguson. Even though this court case might not have been considered successful for some people, like Plessy and his committee, this case had a large impact on America-race relations. This case took place on June 7, 1892, in New Orleans, Louisiana, after this guy named Homer Plessy tested the constitutionality of the separate car law on a train. Plessy was recruited to do so by the New Orleans-based Citizens Committee to test the constitutionality of the separate car law. The separate car law was passed in Louisiana in 1890. The law stated all railway companies carrying passengers in their coaches in the state shall provide equal but separate accommodations for the white and for the colored races. The penalty for breaking this law and sitting in the wrong part of the train was a fine of $25 or up to 20 days in jail. Plessy knowingly broke the law and sat in the white-only section of the train. Since he was an octoroon, which meant he was 1/8 black, he was considered legally black in the state of Louisiana. He was then arrested and spent the night in jail. Judge Ferguson later convicted Plessy. Plessy and his committee were shocked that Judge Ferguson did not dismiss the case this time, because last time they tested the constitutionality of this law with a different person named Daniel Desdunes, who was also an octoroon. They had a victory by having their case dismissed. After Plessy had lost the court case, he then tried to appeal it at the Supreme Court. With the head of his legal team to defend him was a Republican lawyer named Albin Torgey. Their argument was that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were being violated by the separate car law. The 13th Amendment is the abolishment of slavery in America. The 14th Amendment made that everyone who was born or naturalized in this country was a United States citizen. The 15th Amendment stated that no citizen could be denied the right to vote based on race or color, since blacks were considered citizens and could not be discriminated against in the voting process based on their color. Plessy's team argued that the inability to be discriminated against should extend to railroad systems, and anyone should be able to sit on whichever train car they wanted to. The court did not find this to hold true and be a valid argument, so they denied Torgey's interpretation of the particular clause of the 14th Amendment. It was a 7-1 decision that the court ruled the amendment simply intended to prove total equality for all races. Hence the term separate but equal was created. The Jim Crow laws had recently been established before this case, so segregation already existed in America. However, the decision in Plessy v. Ferguson deemed this segregation constitutional and perpetuated it. People claimed the facilities for whites were the same quality for the facilities for blacks. Although that was not the case. Black buildings were mostly run down, old, and in horrible shape. And the whites basically found a way to separate the whites and blacks in everything from restaurants, trains, restrooms, and even water fountains were all segregated. However, there was one justice who voted in favor for Plessy. That was John Marshall Harlan. Harlan felt, in respect of civil rights, all citizens are equal before the law. Even though Harlan was not exactly an activist for equality, he did strongly believe that every citizen is equal in the eyes of the law. The decision from the case was the cause of a 60-year period where African Americans fought to protect their rights that should be protected by the 14th Amendment. This resulted in an outburst of more restrictions of African Americans under the Jim Crow laws. There were even laws which didn't allow blacks to vote because of poll taxes, literacy requirements, and the Grandfather Clause. The Grandfather Clause stated that those who could either vote before 1867 or had a father or grandfather who could vote before 1867 would be able to skip the poll taxes and literacy requirements. Then finally, in 1954, due to the court case Brown v. Board of Education, the Supreme Court declared that the separate but equal law was unconstitutional. This case accomplished what the Plessy case tried to do 60 years earlier. The defense took the same basis as the defense in the Plessy case and applied it to the children in segregated schools. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 legally put a stop to segregation and ended the Jim Crow laws.